How have you been? How are you?
I've been good. Went for a morning swim at 7 a.m.
That's
But we saw dogs.
okay.
Yeah,
That's a good takeaway. Well,
yeah.
so how are you feeling? I know you've already had your first lesson for Greek mythology yesterday. So how has that been?
It was really wonderful. I really, really enjoyed it.
That's great. Like, all right. So I know that you are currently studying like the socio-economic histories of. Can you give us the details of what you're
Yeah.
studying now?
So I have finished all my classes and now I start my thesis in September. I will be studying the implementation of vineyard tax laws by Ptolemy II, so early Hellenistic taxes, and how they reflect the colonial ideals of the time.
All right, so you mentioned Hellenistic. This already
Yeah,
makes me think, oh, that's still Greek. And
yeah.
you're teaching Greek mythology. So what's the connection? Like you're teaching Greek mythology, you're studying, I'm assuming, like history, socioeconomic history of Egypt, I'm assuming, because you mentioned Ptolemy.
Yeah.
Isn't
Um,
he a pharaoh?
he is a pharaoh, but he was originally a Macedonian general and so Greek.
Mm,
And also
okay.
back then they didn't have a division between religion and social life, so it was intrinsically intertwined. So even the tax laws that I'm studying, the
Hmm.
money from them go to a cult. They were sent to the cult of his dead wife, who was becoming a god king, so a pharaoh. So their religion is intrinsically intertwined in everything that they did. There's no separation like nowadays. It's
Okay.
impossible to study any aspect of anything related to Greek history without knowing about their religion.
All right, so that is interesting because for some people, religion is mythology, mythology is religion. Now, you just mentioned cult. Now, in the context of modern times, a cult is sort of looked at as a not really good.
Yeah, no. Cult just
So,
means a following, a group of people who follow a specific god in a specific way. It's like a subsection of the religion. So it's kind of like saying Christianity and then Catholics versus Quakers. They're still both Christians, but they're different kinds. And cults
okay,
tend to, yeah, they had a, often it was a cult of a certain god and then they followed in a certain way.
okay, so I know that Egypt used to have like so many temples, but they're all for the same god. For example, maybe just Horus. I'm not
Yeah.
sure if that's an example, but let's just say that maybe you have three different temples of Horus or four Horus. But so you mean the way they would serve or they would show their reverence to the god is different. That's how
Yeah.
cults are. I see.
Yeah.
All right.
And so you'd have a different cult and then you'd have different subsects in the cult. So like the cult of Athena in Athens, for example, would be very different from the cult of Athena in Sparta.
I I think I remember that mostly from the movie 300. I'm
No.
like, I know. I was a child when I watched that movie. Like, it was just fun. Okay, I've always looked at movies, books, and um, like stories differently. So I don't really attach one to the other. It's just, oh, it's inspired by this thing. I don't believe that this is exactly what
It's
happened because
very inspired,
yes,
is all I can say.
right. Well, okay. So, what got you to study this specific, like ancient Mediterranean socioeconomic history, and then
Um,
you're specifically writing a thesis on taxation? What?
yeah,
How did
yeah.
we get here?
I'm so embarrassed to be an economic historian. Like I really am. Um, but yeah, so I've been obsessed with ancient Egypt for as long as I can remember.
Mhm.
Cleopatra mostly. And then when I was 9, I found the Argonautica for free on Kindle, and so that got me into ancient Greece.
Argo.
And since then, so Argonautica is the story of Jason and the Argonauts. It's written by
Mm-hmm.
Apollodorus in about 300 BCE. Um, but yeah, it's just been out like that ever since. And then I was like, throughout school, I loved history class, went to uni, did international relations first, which gave me existential depression. So I stopped the history.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, in my first year, I had a course on ancient economics, which I really, really enjoyed and had a wonderful teacher. And for that, I ended up writing about Egyptian coins and they're introducing money to their system because they didn't like
Mm-hmm.
money. Um,
Barter system.
yeah, yeah, they used a barter system. They had specific weights, and then you would give that much weight of something. And so, yeah, it kind of just spread from there. I always took the ancient history courses in university if I could,
Mm-hmm.
and the interest just grew. And then last year, I was doing a comparative analysis course, and you had to compare two different colonial time periods. So I
Mm-hmm.
wrote it. I wrote it on early colonial Peru and early colonial Hellenistic Egyptian taxes. And I compared how they combined pre-existing non-monetary taxation with
Mm-hmm.
their with the introduced colonial system of government.
Yes, because Peru
The
is
the
like
the Incas.
the Incas. I immediately thought when you mentioned Peru, I also thought, aren't there pyramids somewhere in South America?
Yes, not in Peru.
Oh, they're not.
They were the Mayans. But yes, so they kind of had a similar situation. So I did a comparative analysis on these two. And then while I'm really interested in the Incas, there's just not the facilities to study it in Europe in English.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I've kind of ended up focusing on Hellenistic Egypt instead.
All right. So we keep going back to Hellenistic, meaning Greek. Greek. Am I correct to say that it means Greek or
Yeah,
Greek
it's a
influence?
time period
Mm-hmm.
of when the Macedonian generals and their descendants ruled a large part of the Eastern Mediterranean. So it's,
Including Egypt.
yeah, including Egypt. So it's from
Mm-hmm.
about third century BCE to like end of like 0 BCE. So
Mm-hmm.
until Cleopatra, until the end of Cleopatra's reign.
I see. All right. So I never really understood that mostly because I don't think I ever actually looked at that. My teachers never made it interesting enough for me to want to look
Yeah,
into why is it called Hellenistic? Like that's the sad part of not having the instructors that are actually interested in their subject matter or specifics of the subject matter. But I get it. Like not
yeah,
everyone has the time. So now, speaking of instructors, you are into Greek mythology.
yeah.
You have been excited. I know you have been when I saw your like when you answered the application for teachers, I was like, ah, a very interested and very inspired person.
Yeah.
So,
Um,
how did we get there?
yeah. I found the Argonautica on Kindle at 9.
Mhm. That's young.
Um, yeah, it's young. I was an advanced reader as a kid.
Mm.
Um, and then it kind of just spiraled from there. I read the Odyssey, the Iliad. Um, and I kind of stuck to those three. I've read the major works now at this point because earlier this year it was my job to know what myths came from where. I worked as a research assistant for a professor of classical Athenian religion.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it kind of just sort of grew. I then discovered Percy Jackson and haven't looked back since. I deeply related to Annabeth Chase for so long. And then yeah, I kind of just never stopped. Just kept reading and reading and reading and just learning more about Greek mythology.
Greek mythology has been like one, if not one of, it is the most prolific of the ancient mythologies, religions
Yeah,
up
it's
until our
influential.
time.
Yeah, it's extremely influential. Like the Renaissance, kind
Mhm.
of kickstarted it off all over again, and it's like a hallmark of Western culture. Is the Greek mythology. Like you'll even see it in American culture, like the eagle as their symbol, with the eagle also being Zeus's symbol.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's insane. Like I live in the Netherlands, and our train station has Hermes on the wall.
Messenger,
Yeah,
quick-footed.
yeah. Like the Netherlands was never like conquered by the Greeks. The Romans down the bottom of it, yeah, but like the influence has spread that far.
Like, I know when I was still studying, one of my classmates, when we were studying Greek and Roman mythology, my classmates vehemently said, Romans just copied from the Greek. What's your view on?
Uh, yeah, no, it's they did in certain parts. So it's called Hellenistic period because that's the time in which Greek culture was considered superior. It's kind of like how American culture is everywhere right now.
Hmm.
And American media is. At that point, it was Greek. So to be cultured, you had to know Greek. You were taught to read and write using the Greek myths. And so a lot of their mythology is deeply inspired by the Greek mythology, but they have their own myths, like that of Aeneas and Romulus and Remus. They also have their own gods, like Mithras um, and Bellona. They have their, and they also, while similar in kind
Hmm.
to the Greek gods, their gods have their very own characteristics that reflect the ideals of the Romans rather than the Greeks. Um, yeah, it's copied in the same way every religion copies from each other. We're humans. We talk to each other. We take and share each other's ideas.
As much as we are divided by land by sea, it still trade still exists. Like you would
Yeah,
see specific rock specimens from one area of the world in another country,
yeah.
and
Five
you'd
thousand
be
years ago, we had the earliest example of trade of Syrian, um, no, of Indian seashells ending up in somewhere in Syria. 5,000 years ago, a huge horde of Indian seashells in Syria. We're just gonna, we like shiny things.
we like shiny things. Yes, we are like magpies in a way. But we also deny that we are magpies.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
we borrow from each other's cultures and just say it's my original.
yeah. But yeah, we kind of do that. And then on top of that, it was only worshipping your god wasn't really a thing back then. If you went to a different, like, country, you'd worship that country's gods.
That's interesting.
Um,
How? What do you mean? How does that happen?
so if a Greek traveled to Rome, they would worship the Roman gods while they were there instead of their own gods because they were the gods of that region.
Hmm.
And so they may have seen similarities in each other's gods and then brought them back and forth and created new ideas from each other and how each other worshipped. There's evidence of, again, Greeks arriving in Jerusalem and worshipping the Jewish god and offering sacrifices because that's just what you did.
I see. That is new to me. I have
Yeah,
never seen that. I've never heard of that, and that is
it,
that is very
it
interesting
wasn't
to learn.
seen that your god was better than other people's gods. It was, we have gods, you have gods. It's like in Rome, do as the Romans do.
Okay, that's a good application of that quote. Um, so at the time, even though to be to be cultured, you have to know Greek.
Hmm.
When you're still traveling, you had respect not only for your like you carry your own religion with you, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. You carry your own religion with you, but once you arrive in a certain place, you still respect them enough or respect the gods there enough to know that you must have reverence at least to the place
Yeah,
you're arriving at, the gods there, the people there, basically as well.
yeah.
So, in my eyes, and this may be very simplistic, it is a more respectful culture at the time
Yeah,
compared
so
to now.
like evangelizing and proselytizing, I can't pronounce that word, but going around and converting people to your religion wasn't a thing until Christianity. Christianity was the first religion to do that. And so yeah, it just
Pain. Oh, the
yeah,
pain.
yeah, I know, right? The cringe. Um I was raised Catholic. Yeah.
Same.
It's weird. I now read about ancient Greece and I know all these places from the Bible.
This is fine. This is fine. So
But yeah, so it was very much I'm in your city. I respect your gods.
it's quite a different view from how
Yeah.
people paint history. I guess also it depends on what part of history you're looking at, but the part of history that some people are fed is that I am superior to you. You must follow mine,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it has become a very destructive view, which is very which is very interesting to note that most ancient cultures, and I'm saying most because I don't believe all of them did, but most ancient cultures pretty much just wanted, like, let's just respect everything because we're all just humans. We're all
Oh
sharing
no.
this
They
one.
still thought that they were better than everyone else. They didn't think their gods were better. Like the Greeks thought they were
Oh,
better than the Romans, and the Romans thought they were better than the Greeks. Um, they just
okay.
respected each other's gods.
So
The
there was
same
a
with the
divide
Egyptians.
there.
There was so
Okay.
much, yeah, there was cultural clashes and cultural divides, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it
Religion
was,
is separate.
yeah, it was like it was less associated with the people and more associated with the region, I guess. So
Mm-hmm.
these are the gods of this region.
Ah, okay, I see. All right. So, I know you said that since you were 9 years old, you were an advanced reader. You've read basically everything about Jason and the Argonauts because of a free translated version of the Argonautica.
Mhm.
Um, how else did that spread? Like, I know Percy Jackson, but Percy Jackson is sort of like a modern take already. It's an adaptation of the legends of the myth. Like, how did you how did you dive into the actual texts?
Again, Kindle free classics. Um,
I love
once you,
Kindle.
yeah, Kindle's amazing. Once it would kind of just suggest them to me, and then they'd have them on free some days, and so I'd just read them again and
Mhm.
again and read them over and over. Wikipedia, Googling, finding out all these things. Um, and again, there's even more free PDFs of stuff on Wikipedia. Like all the sources for the course that for the Greek mythology course can be found free online. A lot of it is because these translations are over 100 years old, and so they're in public domain.
Ah, yes. What's it called? Copyright rules. It
Yeah,
it expires after.
at 100 years. Um,
That's a
but
long.
yeah, yeah, or is it 50? I don't know. Anyway, it's after a certain amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
It is up for free domain. But yeah, it was also going to my local library,
Mm-hmm.
um, finding like yeah, any. I read a lot of like historical fiction based in ancient Greece.
Mm-hmm.
That was like a big thing. We also have yeah, I read out the libraries of the kids section of three of the local libraries. Look, I lived
This
in the middle of nowhere. We didn't have steady internet until I was 13. I spent a lot of time reading.
I okay. I feel you. Like I may live in a city, but my country is not as advanced. I'm just lucky that my parents could afford to send me to a private school that had computers when I was 5 years old. I was trying to remember. Was it five? Was it six? I was 5 years old. First time I had a computer in front of me. I was tiny. That's that's the only thing I'm kind of thankful for that school. They were advanced when it comes to technology. But yeah, I get the feeling of the reason why I was also as a child. take note. As a child, I was also an advanced reader because there
There was
wasn't
nothing
anything
else to do.
interesting. Yeah, nothing else to do. Either I go home to the farm during the summers, and when I'm at school, it's just me and the computer. The computer was very limited too at the time because hello 1990 something. I almost said it. Hello 1990s. There wasn't a lot going on.
Yeah,
So
like even
it's
for me, the first time I sat with a computer in front of me was again around 6 years old in my primary school. That
mm,
was the 2000s. But yeah, we didn't have decent internet till I was maybe 12, 13 years old. Very rural Ireland. I grew up on a farm. My dad is still confused as to why I'm going into academia. Very supportive, very confused.
that's actually to me the kind of the best combination. It would be better to be the confused supportive instead of the confused. I don't want you doing that. No,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't understand it.
No, he bought me my very first grown-up history book on Cleopatra.
Grown up history book. I know the feeling
Yeah.
when you say grown up history book and it's not the child
The child with all the
child.
photos and stuff.
Yeah, and what encyclopedia was famous at the time? I don't remember any.
Britannica.
Hey, yes, that
I had them. I had the kids Britannica
complete.
encyclopedia books.
And in my during my time, like anytime Scholastica would come in, it's like a book sale of a book sale extravaganza, and I was like one of the few kids that had maybe this high of a stack, and I was a small child. I was small as a child, so my
Yeah,
best
I
friend
would
would
be
argue I was so small.
I would be doing like chores all the way, like leading up Twitter and pocket money.
Yes, like all the money I can earn, pocket that, buy all the books I want. Unfortunately, my books got eaten by termites.
Oof. I
Yeah,
just read through
anyway,
mine in like a day or so. I have them all done.
do you know the feeling of reading this thick and yet you're done in within 24 hours and your parents are like,
Yeah,
did
I
you
read
sleep?
Harry Potter Order of the Phoenix in 24 hours for a bed.
Are, are you me? Because I did that and my mother was so mad at me.
Yeah, yeah. My cousin lent me all the Harry Potter books. And so I've actually never bought a Harry Potter book in my life, and I never will. But um, yeah, I was only allowed to have one a week
But you were finished in like a day or maybe
every
two.
time. Yeah, I'd
Maybe
reread
two.
them. And I'd get quizzed when I get finished them to make sure I actually was reading the books.
You got
My parents,
quiz.
yeah, my parents didn't believe that I was actually reading the books that fast.
How did they even know what to ask you? That they would
Oh,
open the book.
my mother loved Harry Potter.
Ah, okay, okay, understandable. Now you mentioned you grew up Catholic.
Yeah,
You and me, same. Our countries are both highly Catholic countries.
yeah. We thought I was gonna be a nun.
What?
Yeah, I was a really religious kid. I was an altar server as well.
Hmm. I wasn't that into religion, but I was in when I finally learned about countries when I was 8 years old. Like I found out about we aren't the only country, we aren't the only people. Maybe that dumb kid, but I was a kid. When I learned that, I was more into what people believed in. At 8, I had a weird appetite for other people's religion compared to
Yeah,
mine.
yeah. I was fascinated by Islam as a kid.
Is would you say that that also helped develop um, your love for mythology? Because mythology is
Yeah,
technically religion of the time.
yeah, yeah. A mythology is just a series of stories that promotes a belief. So it can be religious and it can be non-religious. But yeah, Christian mythology is wild. It's amazing. It's insane.
It's
So is Jewish. I love it. Um,
yes. Have you seen the angels? Have you seen the description of angels? Like a
the angels.
biblically accurate angel will burn you.
There's a reason they had to say, "Do not be afraid."
Be not afraid. I'm terrified.
Yeah, yeah.
A
But yeah, I
thousand
definitely
eyes.
think so. I definitely think so. Um, just yeah, reading about different religions,
Mhm.
really interesting, really cool. especially like seeing the different belief systems, different ways of worship, and then it's kind of you just got to be respectful no matter the time period.
And that's, I think, one of the things that are maybe not missing, but sort of missing. What am I? What am I even saying? Basically, saying we kind of lack the respect for religion that used to exist. Like, sure, you can hate this group of people, but the religion is one other thing. Like, if that's the God that they believe in,
Yeah, you do
you
you.
still respect that, even though you don't particularly fully believe that. It's still, you
Yeah,
respect the belief of the people that you will be existing with for the time.
it's not for me, but you do you.
Yes,
And
yes,
I
that's
don't mean
perfect.
that in a condescending way. I mean, absolutely, it's just not for me. Go wild. I'll be as supportive as you need me to be.
Yes, and that's a very specific way of thinking where you still have a sense of community and individuality where I can be better than you, but hey, a religion is a religion. Might as well. Now, I do have a question, kind of semi-specific. Um, Greek mythology, to me, as somebody who's not specializing in it, I don't remember when the last time I read about it. It's a very broad subject. Um, I know you have like the whole month of July to basically teach it. How did you end up like dividing um, the course matter? So you have
Oh,
like lit. How did you decide? Like I know the what am I doing with my hands? I know the resources can be available online. I love how people say Wikipedia is a bad source. No, you
no.
just need to know how to find it. Like, so
Yeah.
how did you decide on the division?
Well, I kind of decided, okay, well, first of all, we need to, like, last night's class was on, like, giving the basics of, okay, how
Mm,
much do you already know? And then we need to sit down and explain, okay, what is a myth? And who recorded them and who created them and why? Um, and so that was like the first thing that needed to be done. And then afterwards, I kind of went, okay, so we're going to need to give the basis of what the myths are built on. We go with the gods. Um, and originally, I was going to do a separate like course first on the Iliad and the Odyssey because they were like the first some of the earliest myths that we had, and I'm
mhm.
like, no, they're not going to know who these people are. So first, first so on Monday is the course on the creation myth because you need
Yeah.
to know the world that they're living in. I was like, okay, that first, and then I was like, okay, so that leads nicely into the original six Olympian gods, and then after
Zeus.
that we so Zeus, Hades, Poseidon, um, Hera, Demeter, and Hestia.
Okay, yeah. All right.
Yeah. And then after that, I was like, okay, well, let's introduce the other seven because Hestia steps down to let Dionysus join the council later. Um, yeah, so I was like, okay, well, we've got that. So that means we've got the big 12 gods with Hestia. Hestia she doesn't appear much in mythology. She very much keeps to herself. She's one of my favorites. Um, I just think she's neat. Um, and
Understandable.
yeah, she's the goddess of home. Um, so we have and then I was like, okay, now we can do the archaic myths. So the first ones, which are the Iliad and the Odyssey. So they kind of wait, no, first we do the ages of men in the creation class, which talks about the different ages of humanity.
Hmm.
And then we go back to the heroic age, and then we talk about the Iliad and the Odyssey. Um, and then other myths that take place and are written in that era of time.
Nice.
And then we go on to the later myths. And when I say later myths, I mean myths that are later, like chronologically, they're written in a later point of time because
Hmm.
the characterization of the gods and the heroes change.
Isn't that
Even
also? Oh yes. Go ahead.
even though they're technically set in the same time period.
I see. So people change, and isn't that a bit of an issue with how mythology was recorded? Or it,
Yeah.
okay, here's something I kind of um, want clarity on. Were the Greek myths, were they written or were they of oral uh, tradition?
So originally they were oral, so
Mm.
um, they would speak them. So you'd have poets, and they travel around cities, and they would recite the whole Trojan saga. We only have two books of the Trojan saga, and they're huge, like the Iliad and the Odyssey, chunky boys.
Hmm.
Um, and those are two of a 12-part saga, and we don't have the other 10 parts.
Oh.
Um, and so they would be learned off by heart and then recited and sang.
Hmm.
Um, and then later on, kind of in the golden age of Athens and then in the Hellenistic period, they were written down as practice for learning how to read and write, and also learning oration, so how to speak and rhetoric.
Ah, I see. Oh, good lord. Me being forced to compete um, for orations when I was a child. Hello, reading the Iliad as a 9 year old. I don't know how I don't know how they decided to use the Iliad for
That's the
oration
classic.
for a 9 year old.
That's the classic. That is what they originally used.
Fair enough, but still,
Yeah, yeah.
it's like being force fed. It is, yes, it is a classic, but it's like being force fed when you're not ready.
Yeah, yeah, it's way too complicated. If you're using like an older translation, it's extremely complicated for a kid to read. The newer translations are a lot easier to read.
That was practically me just staring at my teacher like, sorry, what?
Yeah, yeah.
And I was a shy child, so I could never stand up for myself. Anyway, so you said we only have like two volumes, Iliad, Odyssey, and that's the pain of being both of being a fan of old work, old ancient work, as well as being a historian. Like, what happened? Why? I was a shy child, Kitty. Child. Anyway, um, sorry, I got distracted by. Um, how do we know that we are missing like or that it's originally 12 volumes? How did we know? Like
Because we have
how?
other people who had them, and say that there's 12 volumes. We have the like Plutarch is great for this. I love Plutarch because you know what Plutarch does? He cites his stuff.
Oh, citations. I hated it
He
when I was
cites
studying.
his stuff.
I love it now that I'm an adult, but I
He's one of the
hated it
first
when I was.
people who did it. So we have him, and the citations that reference things that we have right now are really accurate and really well done.
Mm, mm.
And so we're kind of taking that the citations that for things that we don't have are really accurate and really well done. Um, and so Plutarch is one of the examples of okay, we know we're missing these things because he cites them, but also there'll other people will mention them and reference them in their own works. And like academic drama, really old, goes all the way back to when we first had like philosophy.
What is
Um,
academic grammar?
oh, saying you're completely wrong. You are illiterate. How could you interpret it this way? Um, you're ignorant. Um,
Ah, the
are you
classic.
blind? Yes. And so kind of that's like so old. It's just insulting each other and insulting your ability to read and interpret. And so people will reference what other people thought or argue and say, well, this is wrong or this is right.
Okay, so yeah, we are humans.
Yeah, some things really don't ever change.
Just like the very classic example of a man complaining about copper pipes.
A Nasir. I've done presentations on this as well. Yeah. In the letters from Lani to A Nasir. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's their first customer complaint. It was one of about 20 different tablets, all writing complaints in us here. He scammed people out of copper. He scammed people out of clothing. He would sell secondhand clothing as brand new clothing, and that's insane. That's like 5,000 to 6,000 years ago, and he was shipping from modern day, I think it's Iraq, and it was all the way down to Egypt in the modern day for the wheel.
And the only reason why we even have these is because the clay tablets that were meant to be washed away, because
No,
it's
they weren't.
clay, they were burned. They were cooked.
No, these are a specific kind of clay that is extremely
Oh,
durable. And because it's in the
hmm.
desert and it's extremely dry,
It
nothing can do anything to them except water.
and I work with clay, so I know how you can basically remove what's written on it when you
Yeah,
wet it enough.
until it's done. Yeah.
Yeah, until it's either air dried or baked.
These were really, we actually don't know how to make these anymore, but these were really
Mm.
well baked. And the only way to get, like, to um destroy them, I suppose, is to soak them in water for a long period of time.
Oh Lord, yeah, no, no, good Lord.
But yeah,
But yeah, we are human. Just the fact that we in academics there's still debates
discourse.
more
Yeah.
debates more on they're basically insulting each other. Like,
Yeah.
nah, you misunderstand this text. This
Me,
doesn't mean what you're saying.
me, every time I have to talk about Moses Finley in a paper.
Which one? Sorry.
Moses Finley, he was a theorist on ancient economies and said that basically ancient Egypt didn't have an economy. It was all temple-based redistribution and therefore didn't have markets. The man is very wrong, and he was very Orientalist. So yeah, he kind of thought that Eastern, so non-Greek and Roman economies were lesser, or they just didn't exist.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wow, that's an extreme. Um.
yeah, in the ancient times, because they didn't look like, they weren't as similar to modern day economies
Mhm,
as Greek and Romans were. They were more redistribution based.
mhm.
So yeah, and they didn't have coins.
Oh, okay. So the
At
way
least in
people
the case of
would pay
Egypt.
back is
Yeah,
either they give their like part of a percentage of what they create or what they harvest
yeah,
or their time, right?
yeah.
Could
So
you
it's
give
like
an
corvée labor.
example?
Yeah, so when it comes to the pyramids, at least, the pyramids were paid in what's called corvée labor. So your rent basically was paid in the amount of time that would spend on public works. So if you were on temple land, it was generally spent building and repairing temples. But if you were on state land, on royal land, it would be spent building the pyramids. So the pyramids in themselves were built by very well skilled, highly paid, well compensated laborers. And we have this because we have receipts for like the food that
Neat.
they'd be given, and
Hmm.
like they'd be given tokens for food, and we have like skeletons, and they're really well taken care of. Um, and so yeah, that's how the pyramids were built. But they didn't use money really until the Hellenistic period, when these tax reforms that I'm studying for my thesis came in, kind of introduced money on a widespread basis. And
Hmm.
then I know in like Eastern Mediterranean, so like modern day Turkey, Palestine, Jordan, all those, they were actually among the first to have money.
Hmm. Like
Um,
actual coins.
yeah, actual coins, but they tended to, they have what's called temple estates. So a lot of the economy was, rather than being controlled by the state, was controlled by religious figures.
Mm, okay. Controlled by religious figures. So at the time, religion and the state were not very separate. Am I correct?
No, absolutely not.
They were pretty much one thing.
Yeah.
Is this both in Greek, in Greece, not just Greek, but in Greece, also in Egypt? Because I believe in Egypt it was more so because the
No,
pharaoh is a god.
it was, yeah, so the pharaoh is a god in Egypt, but in Greece they
Mm.
emphasized bloodline a lot. They were really big into bloodline, and so a lot of them would claim descendancy from the old heroes or from mythological figures that were connected to their to the city state that they were from. So it was really common, pretty normal for different like elite families in Athens to claim descendancy from Theseus, and then another guy, I can't ever pronounce his name, but the son of Athena and Hephaestus.
I forgot his name.
Yeah, it begins with E and it ends with Eos. But I can't pronounce the middle part. Um, but yeah, he look, I'm dyslexic. Um,
I'm highly my attention is always like, ooh, what the
yeah,
hell is that?
yeah, I'm dyslexic. I can't pronounce English, which is my first language. Never mind any other language. Um, but yeah, it's really common to claim this lineage, and then often the gods were invoked. So when you start the Senate or the Parliament, you invoke the gods, and in ending it, you invoke the gods, and in speeches, you invoke the gods, and just there was no separation.
I see. Okay. So they didn't say that they were God. They just said, I am from
I'm
so
of the
and
gods, yeah.
mm.
And so kings at the time were seen; they weren't seen as above. They weren't seen as above other nobility. They were seen among peers until Alexander, and that is the first time a king was in like ancient Greece. And I say ancient Greece, most of the evidence we have is from Athens and Sparta. We don't have
Mhm.
much evidence from other polis, and so just take what I'm saying as to be Athenian.
Okay.
But yeah, so Alexander the Great was kind of the first to be consider himself above his peers, and the first to be revered as a god king of the Greeks.
I see. Huh, that's very interesting.
And then with the Egyptians, yeah, they
Mm.
believed that they were embodiments of Horus, and their wives were embodiments of Isis.
So they were above above everyone.
Yeah,
Hence the pyramids,
hmm
the massive tombs that they are in.
yeah,
Okay.
because they believed that you brought things with you to the dead, to
Mm.
death, in death. So often their mummies would be wrapped in parchment that had their favorite stories inscribed on them. And
Oh,
so that's where we've actually gotten a lot of Greek myths, and we could probably find a lot of the unknown ones if we unwrap the mummies, but that's extremely disrespectful to the dead. So we don't do that anymore. We're not
thankfully we don't.
Victorians who ate them.
Mummy Brown. Mummy Brown. Yes, I only knew that they unwrap mummies mostly because I love to paint. At one point in my life, I used to paint a lot. So one of my favorite colors, because it's a very versatile shade, a shading color, is brown, mummy-based brown, which I thought was just maybe it's because it's the same color as a dried human. No, originally it's made from human.
Yeah,
Also, they ate it, and that's when I
ate
found out
it.
that Victorians used to eat. Ew.
Yeah, yeah. No, they were extremely disrespectful, and so now we don't because we gotta respect the dead.
All right,
And
which I'm very thankful for.
yeah, and there's a lot of movements to remove dead bodies from museums because it's disrespectful.
I'm torn on that. Like, how are we going to return them? Yeah, how are we going to return them? For example, what if
Well,
the
and
site that they were buried in, what if now the site that they used to be buried in, what if now it's like an apartment complex or it's too modernized for it to be returned to its original grave? What if its grave was destroyed prior to being found? That's
I'm
another
not
thing.
an expert on those situations,
Mm.
but I do know that in there's this particular case in the British Museum right now. There was a man from Galway in Ireland, and he was exceptionally tall. He was like 2.5 meters tall, and they had his body on display in the British Museum, expressly against his written wishes and his family's wishes. And after his family petitioning for like 150 years, they've removed his body from the museum and now it's in a box. His skeleton is in a box in their basement and they won't give it back.
They won't give it back to the family.
Yeah, the family wants to bury it in their family grave.
All right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know the British Museum has quite a bit of a history with
taking things that don't belong to them. All majority of European museums are like that, and American.
oops. Let's not mention that one. I'm kidding. I'm
Yeah,
kidding. Anyway, um, it is a very interesting, like, I get it as somebody with a very Hispanic background and the way we treat our dead. I understand the desire of many people to bring back the dead bodies, bring back the mummies, whatever you call the dead bodies, because some people don't call them mummies. I think mummified, but not exactly
yeah.
mummies. I get it. I get the desire to return them home, and even the jars, like burial jars, or not even burial jars, the jars that
Held their organs.
Coptic Coptic jars was it
Yep,
called? Yeah.
held their organs.
Yes. At least return them, if that's the only thing that can be returned. I as a Hispanic colony, I kind of get it. I want my family's organs to be in our, at least in our graveyard, or in our possession, in my locality at least. So yeah. All right. Okay, Bree. Let's let let me pause my questions for a bit, and let's look at chat. I think I saw a kind of I had to laugh at a quip from Betty's Dungeon Adventures. So Western elitism, it has had a long history. They mentioned this when you were mentioning the guy who said Egypt did not have,
Yeah,
yeah,
an economy.
an economy. Well,
Yeah, it's a huge problem. It is a gigantic problem. Like personally, ethically, I don't think, despite it being my dream, I will never go on a dig in Egypt because
never
it's
go on a
not
what?
a dig, an archaeological dig on
Oh,
Egypt. I won't. If I'm given that job offer, I won't because it's not for me. For 2 centuries now, white people have gone to Egypt and dug up their shit. It
mm,
should be left to them. It's their history. It's not mine. I'll look at the artifacts when they're removed, but I don't have the cultural expertise to go to their place, to go to their home and
mhm.
deal with their dead, with the things that belong to their dead. Yeah, it's a huge problem. Um, it's throughout history, throughout all time scales. Um, for example, I also look at the Incas and at early colonial Peru and Bolivia, or what is now Peru and Bolivia, a lot. And I have started learning what's called Southern Peruvian Quechua, which is one of the indigenous languages, so that I can translate um, the documents myself if I need to, because
Mhm.
my predecessors were extremely awful and racist towards the indigenous people of the Andes. And that means when I read them and I translate them, and if I translate something to be bigoted or racist, it's on me. It's my fault. It is not because I'm reading someone else's work that is bigoted and racist. And then I can work on it and change it and fix it myself. But yeah, I'm extremely passionate about this. Yeah, it's been ongoing for centuries. This idea that Western ideals and Western history is better than everybody else's, and you'll see it in historical methods, pedagogy, how we research history, the superiority of written records over oral histories, or written or not written histories, over spoken or visual or material histories. Yeah, it's everywhere. It's like intrinsic in the discipline.
We also have another sort of question. Sunny Bird Boy, I'm
Hi, Sunny.
they're here. They did leave this one. Um, I'd love to know Bree's opinion on how modern Greek paganism interacts with the myths that we're familiar with. Yeah, that we're familiar with. So basically, the modern practices, you know how paganism has had a boom
Yeah.
in the last, I don't know, 20 years, I believe so. What do you think of how pagans,
Um,
they're specifically Greek pagans,
I'm
interacting?
probably not the best person to speak on this, as the majority of things I have seen about Hellenistic paganism have been through social media and through influencers on that topic. But
Mhm.
from what I have seen, I think that there's a lot of, it's often reformed Christian or former Christians who become Hellenistic pagan, and I think they carry a lot of the baggage of being raised Christian along with it. Specifically, the idea that their gods that they follow are better than everyone else's gods. Um, and the way that they worship is the only way to worship. That's kind of what I've seen from social media. It's probably not true. It's probably just a very vocal minority. But I do
Mm.
really think that they should kind of take a leaf out of the ancients books and just kind of go with, well, it's not for me, but you do you. And kind of let people worship the way that they want. But I also do see a lot of misconceptions on how benevolent gods are. They're not malevolent. The Greek gods back then, they were not benevolent. They were like an exaggeration of humanity. So they could be extremely kind and extremely awful at the same time. Like you've seen Zeus.
That was what I was gonna say. Like Zeus.
Yeah, Zeus. He could be wonderful and kind, but he could also be a horrible, horrible person.
He's a
The gods.
man whore.
Yeah, he really is. He's not as bad as Poseidon. Poseidon was worse. But yeah, I really think that reading the original source material uh, could be quite important. Reading the original hymns as well.
Hmm.
I think a lot of it's very distorted through the lens of how we view things in modern times.
Hmm.
And for the love of all that is holy, Persephone was a child. Her and Hades' relationship is not something to be idolized.
I was getting there. I was getting there because there have been a lot of Hades apologists. I don't know if that's the right term I
Lower
should use.
Olympus.
Besides Lore Olympus, a little, but yeah, the most famous right now is Lore Olympus. But yeah, Kore, sure. Let's just. People are saying that her name was just a translation of young child, and it wasn't really the case that she was a child.
Yeah, no, Homeric hymn to Demeter. I think I think it's about line 37 or something. It states that it uses the term child to refer to as a preteen girl.
Hmm.
And then additionally, she is distracted by a shiny toy
For
for
what?
him to
What?
kidnap her. Persephone,
Uh-huh.
is
Uh-huh.
distracted by a shiny toy and that is how she is kidnapped.
Take that. Anyway,
Yeah, yeah. So again, I really think people need to read the source material.
I agree because I would admit I am uh, also raised Catholic, specifically Catholic, Roman Catholic, but I am multi faith.
Yeah,
I basically consume each and every religion and make it my own. I don't practice all of them, but I believe in all of them. Example here, if you can see it. Um, this is a very Christian view on Norse mythology, where you must believe in one so that you will never get lost.
okay, so with Norse mythology is a bit of a different situation
Yeah.
because Norse mythology was entirely oral histories until it was recorded by Christian monks.
Yes,
We don't
that's.
have a non-Christianized version. It's the same with Celtic mythology.
Hmm.
We don't have a non-Christian version of their mythologies and their beliefs.
Which is the sad part because it feels like
It's awful.
having none, unlike the Greeks, Greeks is the most, unlike Greeks, unlike Romans, and unlike some Egyptian, because Egyptians, we still have the hieroglyphs. We still have the hieroglyphs in their original place. Sure, the
Yeah,
translations can be a bit iffy sometimes, but
yeah.
it's still there. Once you learn to read it, it's there. You can see
Yes,
it.
they didn't use
it
vowels.
the thing with uh, and I've always loved Celtic and Norse. I know it's a weird combination of things to put together. Anyway, it's just that I feel like we lost so much of two beautiful mythol two beautiful histories, not just the mythology, but two beautiful histories because they themselves were not able to write it. They were purely oral tradition, and they were written by people who already had a religious lens, the Christian writers or
Hmm.
Catholic writers, whatever they are, their own lens. While they were, some I believe did try to be as accurate, but they still have like a religious lens, which is something I find very interesting, that Becca's already mentioned with regards to translation work or
Yeah,
translation work, and basically when you translate, when you write something down from somebody else's work, sometimes it gets filled in or sometimes
yeah,
you omit something. It has to be in context. So I think we are missing the true context of both Norse and Celtic um, religion,
absolutely.
mythology, which is kind of sad because they were some of the most brutally creative. I'm going to use the word brutal because
Yeah,
they were
yeah.
brutally creative in their celebrations of the world, because Norse especially is very cyclical. It it
They love
it
their Eddas.
yes, it's cyclic where they there's always life and there's always death, and it will go around.
Hmm.
Everyone will go through that, even the gods. Hence Ragnarok. As oh, speaking of, so we have the Ragnarok in Norse mythology, the end of the worlds.
Yeah.
Do we have anything like that? Any equivalent like that in Greek?
I really don't think so. Um, so we have the cycles. We have the succession myth, which is when, spoilers for the next class, we have the primordials,
Mm,
who are then, Kronos kills his father Uranus
yes.
through trickery. And we have the Titan era. Zeus kills
Yep.
Kronos
Yep.
through trickery. And so it kind of, we don't really have like we have the failed giant uprising, which is Gaia's next children, which failed, and that's kind of the closest thing you had to the end of the world. Um, the Greeks kind of saw a rise and fall of nations like cycles, but
Hmm.
that's really about it. They didn't see that with their gods.
Their gods were
Um,
permanent.
yeah, the gods were the world itself.
Mm,
Um, and so it would just keep on going.
I see. Oh,
Um, yeah, the closest thing I can think of is Apollo and Python, but big giant snake that was killed by Apollo. But that's really about it. They didn't really have a end of the world myth.
I see. Okay. Yeah, because I wasn't sure if I'm remembering correctly that of of the many mythologies we went over when I was in high school, that only Norse had an actual end of the world part.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Oh, and this is an interesting kind of an interesting question from Rioni. What motivated you to apply to the summer summer school program? Like you
Oh,
could have just enjoyed your summer doing nothing.
no,
Why?
this is kind of my dream job, teaching people.
Ooh,
I
hello.
want to
This is
be,
practice now.
yeah, I want to be a researcher and a professor. That's kind of my goal. I got my grades back last night, and I got high enough grades for a research master's, so I'm one step closer. But yeah, my end
I
goal is to understand, or is to teach this to people,
that's 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 beautiful because
and to make it more accessible, because the classics are so elitist and so inaccessible to people.
that is
Um,
true.
there's a huge problem in it of like classism and such. And to make this more accessible, to explain it in simple language would be like, yeah, it's a huge goal for me.
So would you agree that there are parallels between among not between among mythos of different places of the world? Like, sure, we have the Greek and Romans as the best examples, I guess. Like they were parallel and then they intersected in some places that they were copies in of some parts were copies of each other, some parts were kind of original. Would you say that um, most of the time the world would always have like a parallel to something else?
Yeah,
There,
I kind of think so. Religions often end up quite similar to each other after some time, and so do mythologies, especially if they're within proximity to each other.
hmm.
So I know the Celts have the god Lu of the sun, who
Yes.
is quite similar in appearance to Apollo,
Hmm.
both Greek and Roman Apollo. Um, I know that Isis, kind of the idea of a goddess of motherhood,
Hmm.
is like unanimous among all.
Yeah.
I do think that a lot of them tend to have male gods as their war gods. The Celts are a bit of an anomaly for this with the Morrigan.
Yeah.
Um, she's very cool. Um, but on Morrigan is kind of like anomaly. They tend to, the gods themselves reflect the cultures in which they live in. And so they tend to reflect the gender roles a lot. And that kind
Hmm.
of seems to be an ongoing thing. Also, all of them had dragons in some shape or form,
All.
except for Celts. Except for Irish Celts. I don't know so much about other forms of Celtic mythology. I know
Hmm.
for Irish mythology we don't have it, but that's mostly because we don't have snakes in Ireland.
Oh yeah. That is one of the weirdest things I learned about Ireland growing up is there are no natural snakes in Ireland.
Yeah,
Maybe people, but
we have like a lizard or two. So we don't really have dragons in Celtic mythology.
mhm.
Um, but yeah, most places will have dragons of some form.
So there are parallels or exact
Yeah,
mirrors of each other.
yeah.
Okay, that is very interesting. It does go back to we are all human and we kind of all walk
I
paths.
also my personal theory that it has something to do with dinosaur fossils.
There are no dinosaur fossils in Ireland,
Um, there
or I'm
are, but they're not very
misunderstanding.
big ones. So
Oh,
a lot of the places will have dinosaur fossils, and I think that they may have gone digging and found a dinosaur fossil, and that's what they based their dragons off of. But that's my own personal theory, not based in any fact.
fair enough. That's understandable. I don't remember where one of our most famous mythological creatures called the Bakunawa came from. Although what I do know about it is that it's a giant dragon-esque snake thing that lives in
Nice.
the sea. Yeah, it's a I don't. Depending on which translation you read, Bakunawa is either snake-like, dragon-like, but basically he lives in the sea. And the reason why we have an eclipse is he tries to eat the moon.
That is amazing.
Mm, Philippine mythology, unfortunately, is small compared comparatively. Like we are, a lot of our records were destroyed by
The Spanish.
colon. I wasn't gonna say, but yes, obviously, yeah. Um, and yes, I am Catholic. Obvious Spanish influence there,
Hmm.
but I am trying to go back also to studying um, basically the religion before the Spaniards came. So
That is
mythology,
wonderful.
I try. I try. It's difficult when you don't really have access to the source material because it's behind a paywall, or you have to be enrolled in that school to read it. So I like how you, hi baby, look at the cat. Sorry, got distracted.
She
I
woke
like
up.
how I like how you want to have all of this accessible to people, like
Yeah.
Greek myths, the classics. They are. I remember when I was in high school and we had like for English class we had mythology. Yeah, we had mythology. Um, the only way we could read the classics was because my teacher was specifically studying in one university, and she basically borrowed the book on extended, like for an extended lease, just so she can have her students see it, and those who want a copy. Oh, the cat has sent a message in chat.
Kiki says hi.
Yes, Kiki says hi. Um, so basically, that's the only way we were able to read any of like semi-original translations and such
Yeah.
manuscript. I remember she went on a vacation in the middle of the school year, and she came back with a copy from who knows where, I don't remember, of a specific Trojan, an episode in the Trojan story. Like she taught it to us in like parcels, like what started the Trojan War, what who are the main players, and
Hmm.
things like that. She wanted to make us understand what was happening at the time and why the Trojan War apparently happened. Not just the basis of the myth, where apparently the goddesses were mad that they who was anyway who was the prettiest, something like that, the golden apple. But she wanted to teach us the politics of the time, why the mythology would reflect, or if you look at the history, it would actually reflect in the mythology of the time.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that even accurate?
The history reflecting, yes,
Yes.
it is. So when it comes to the Iliad and the Odyssey specifically, it's written about events that happened 400 years before Homer. And so the cultural aspects of those events and the setting and such reflect Homer's time. Oh no. Oh dear.
Are we back? Are we back?
What?
Hi, Bree.
You're back?
Bree. I'm
Great.
I'm
Hi.
I'm sorry.
Cool.
I'm sorry. Like what? I don't know. I'm not sure what happened. It just flashed a message like there's a problem. But as you were saying, so sorry
Yeah.
about that.
So it reflects the ideals of Homer's time. Um, so Homer existed in what we call the Archaic or the Dark Age. We don't have very much evidence of this age, at least not sociocultural evidence. And so
Mm.
the Iliad and Odyssey are in fact, he left really your butt. Um,
Hi, baby.
um, but yeah, so they're actually really good sources for like beauty ideals and what is the perfect man. Like if you see his how he describes Agamemnon and Achilles, they
Yes.
reflect like the perfect man, the ideals of man at that time. And so you'll see it actually in a lot of how they view Artemis. Um, reflects ideals of the time related to the wilderness and related to how they imagine her. In earlier books, she's like this petulant child, and in later books, she's this noble huntress of the mountains that swoops down
Mhm.
to kill unjust men.
Yes.
Yeah,
I was a follower of Artemis for a long time.
Artemis is really cool. She's one of, yeah, she's really cool. Um, but yeah, she's so that kind of it really reflects because the gods are seen as exaggerations of human, they pour how they see each other into the gods and their description of them.
How they see each other. Oh, that's very interesting. Yeah, if you're going to attribute, or if you're going to give human attributes to the gods, or how does that, they are the ideal human basically.
Yeah, they're like humans on steroids, if that makes sense. Their personality.
Oh Lord.
Yeah,
Of course, we have the
and
most the absolutely um famous brothers Zeus and Poseidon being absolutely amazing in bed, even though forcing their partners
Yeah, yeah.
just
No,
because they have.
that was a pretty big thing. But the one that I know most about is the architects of, are the archetypes of the unmarried daughter, which appear in Hestia, Artemis, and Athena.
Hmm.
With Artemis being the wild child, yet to they're called Parthenoi. Um, but she's like the wild, untapped energy of youth. And then Athena is the loyal daughter, ever waiting to serve her father, um, and his shield and his sword and his wisdom. And then Hestia is the daughter who stays at home to care for the family.
I want to say, just I want to say, I'm at this point in my life. I am Hesty at the moment.
Yeah, Hestia's pretty cool. Hestia's wonderful.
Eh, Yeah, but the way you described her was kind of like, yeah, yeah, that's kind of how I am right now.
She is home. That is
She is
that is
home.
her domain is home. They carry her hearth everywhere. In every center of every town there was a hearth to Hestia, and she was given offerings at the beginning of every offering. There was first an offering to Hestia.
Even if it's for like a different
Yeah,
celebration, there's
yeah.
always one for
She
her.
didn't have any temples because she was everywhere. She was oikos, which is like civilization. That's Hestia. She is home.
I like that. I like that
Yeah,
meaning of her.
yeah. And that is the unmarried daughter. She stays at home and she is the glue. She keeps everybody together.
Yet I'm the chaotic one who actually
Yeah,
instigated
yeah,
a lot of problems.
yeah. Look, I cannot relate. I left the country at 18.
Understandable. Like I never
Yeah.
left my home. That's I think I only left my house to intern for a few months when I was 20. 20? Yeah, when I was 20. So it was like 6 months of just absolute chaos while I was interning somewhere else.
Yeah. No, I emigrated at 18. I finally 4 years later I have my own apartment. I have my own kitchen. I'm territorial in a kitchen.
I love the kitchen. Oh.
I love to cook. I can't do it so much right now. Like my joints don't let me.
Uh-huh.
So I can't do anything complicated like I used to right now.
Mhm.
But I'm so excited to get back to it.
Cooking is amazing. Just the and you mentioning Hestia, I remember I don't remember the exact way she was described to me by my teacher because I would always pull that teacher aside when I told you who went somewhere in the middle of the school year to get a specific book that she's
Yeah.
been waiting for. I would always pull her to the side. I would ask her like, is this a good, or I would ask her about a specific god or whatever. And she would usually describe them in the most humane way. Like Zeus is humanity's depravity rolled into one, but is still trying to be good,
Yeah.
still trying to lead. I don't know if that's a good description of Zeus. What it to me was in a very specific, for her to say that it's human depravity rolled into one and yet still tries to be the noble human or the noble one despite
He
all
is
of
the god of justice.
Mhm.
That's the thing. He's the leader.
Mm-mm.
He is an exaggeration of what the Greeks believed a leader to be.
Including the raping.
Yeah, they didn't see it like that.
Hmm. What did they see that as?
Um, it's hard to explain. Um, it was very much once. Women were seen as property. In the case of Athens, because this is what we have it's awful, but they weren't seen as people.
Hmm.
Hence why you have Athenian law saying all citizens can vote, but less than 10% of Athenians were actually citizens. And even then,
Okay.
women who were considered citizens
Cannot.
because their parents were citizens, they couldn't vote. They were seen as property, so those women were the property of Zeus.
Nice.
And additionally, men weren't, they had a big modesty culture. Men couldn't control themselves. Toxic masculinity 101. And so it was kind of seeing the boys being boys kind of thing.
Mm. That is the worst
Um,
version of the boys being the boys.
yeah, it really is. It's atrocious and awful. And their idea of homosexuality was only okay if the person on the receiving end that was receiving penetration was under the age of 18. That
Excuse
was the,
me.
yeah, that was the only time it was acceptable. And boys in Greek iconography are dressed as modestly as women.
Okay, that threw me off.
Yeah,
That's so you can't be gay based. What what did my camera do that? You can't be gay when you're over 18, or if
yeah.
you
Then
have to be
you
gay.
can't you can't be penetrated if you're over 18 because you're a man. Men can't be penetrated. Only if they're under 18 and they're not considered men, then it's okay.
So that's also kind of why some men would prefer to look like women for a or the where was this? I think it was an artwork that I saw once where the it was a young boy, but he kind of did not look like a young boy. He kind
Yeah,
of looked like a young androgynous, but kind of looked female mostly to me.
yeah,
Well, that leaves a bad taste in my mouth.
yeah. It's not nice. It's really not.
But but still, to them, that is the ideal.
Yeah, you'll see it with Zeus and Ganymedes, his cupbearer,
Hmm.
or young boy, a teen boy.
All right.
Yeah,
It's interesting how they would depict that as the ideal leader.
yeah.
It okay. How did or has that did that ever change in ancient Greece? How they viewed Zeus? How they viewed the main Olympians?
Well, they were never seen. The gods were not meant to be good. They were human. They were meant to be an exaggeration of humanity. They were never good.
And
They were,
that's
yeah,
and that's the thesis of it all, guys.
yeah.
There's no
Gods
good or
were never
evil
good.
among.
Yeah. Um, they were people. They were extremely powerful people, and the way they were described were exaggerations of how people acted.
So that's why whoever says Hades is evil, no, he's not. He's
No,
just somebody who harvests the dead, or
he's
not
yeah,
harvest.
he's evil for what he did with Persephone, but
Should
he is. They are not good or evil. They are people.
It's like people saying war is not just good or evil. There's always something other than good or evil at work.
Yeah, it just is.
All right. So let's just now that I have like now that we've covered what you study, your interests, and why you're teaching Greek mythology, I want to talk about you just a little bit. Like
Okay.
you are to me a very interesting person. Like I've been to your stream maybe a few times. Most of the time, I'm not logged in, so you can't really see my name on the side. Um, and I remember you look very interesting when you are streaming. It feels like it's familiar. And I know you say your channel, your area is a safe space. A safe
Like,
space for who?
for disabled people, people with learning disabilities, and people who are queer, because I am both. Um, I've been collecting disability diagnoses for the past 2 years, like Pokemon. And so I kind of wanted to be a place where you can be that, because most of the time you have to hide it and pretend that everything is okay. And just a place of solidarity.
Solidarity. Oh, okay. So You say you are collecting diagnoses, like Pokemon.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm actually the happiest I have ever been. It's
Because
wild.
you now know what's going
What's
on,
wrong? What the fuck is up with my body? It's weird. Yeah, I
and
have answers.
and it gives you a chance to actually feel like you're in control,
Yeah.
from what I understand. Yeah, understanding something gives you the opportunity to choose what to do next.
Yeah, and it gives you access to accommodations to level the playing field. It gives you you know what coping mechanisms to try. Like I had to relearn how I study. I had to relearn how to study, how to write papers because the method that you're taught, or like the standard method that is taught, doesn't work
For you,
for me.
it works for some people, but
It works for
specific.
most people. It doesn't work for me.
I see. So how does it feel to that? Okay, you want to teach, but how does it feel that you're also, you said you're dyslexic? What
Yeah.
does that feel like? How does that, I'm sure that helped in making you want to teach, because maybe when you were younger and you were, it was a lot harder to learn because of dyslexia. How, I'm sure that affected your desire to teach. But how do you,
Um,
mhm.
it's weird. I was only diagnosed with dyslexia last year. I took fake it till you make it a little bit too hard and never made it and just kept faking it. Um, yeah, I had
Okay.
burnout at yeah, I had burnout at 16 and recovered at 21. Um, so it was wild. Um, it kind of affected in that I want to be the kind of teacher that you can go to if you're having trouble. Who like I've had some amazing and also awful experiences with teachers. In terms of accommodations, I've had to teach every language teacher I've come across since I got diagnosed what dyslexia is. Like they don't know. Because at a university level, people don't expect dyslexics to be taking language classes.
That is true though.
Because even though this is really relevant for in the Netherlands right now, because Dutch one of the Dutch education minister or someone is trying to bring in it compulsory that you to learn Dutch to go to study in the Netherlands. But it's really exclusive to those who can learn languages. Because if you're dyslexic and your teacher is not educated in how dyslexia impacts you, and even if they are, learning languages takes twice as long if your brain makes all the words do a little dancey dance every time you try to read.
That's, that is okay. I get it. Like you want people to learn your language.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, you would be expected to take courses alongside your own coursework. And in the Netherlands, your first year of university is the hardest year because it's extremely easy to get into Dutch universities. Like the requirements are really low, but then your first year is hard. It's harder than any year because they're weeding you out. And you're expected to take a language class on top of that and keep up with your Dutch peers. So yeah, but when it comes to being me teaching, it's very much I want to be the teacher that even if I don't understand what's going on, I will just go, okay, this is what you need. I'll do my absolute best to make sure that you get it.
Just understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. The most important thing is accommodation and also the access to resources.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like the, what you're studying. So you're studying ancient economies, or yeah. I'm just gonna shorten it. I'm sorry. Like my brain can't wrap around the whole title of what you're studying.
Just yeah, ancient economics is good.
Ancient economics, and you're going to be writing a thesis on taxation. It, to me, it already feels very, very difficult to get resources for that specific. Even if, a child would be interested in that, getting resources in order to study that would mean you have to get to a good university here,
Yeah.
because that is not
Um,
available anywhere here.
yeah, you need what's called access to JSTOR, which is an online repository of articles, um, which majority of universities have access to, at least in Europe and in
Mhm.
the US. So in the West, it's pretty common to have access to JSTOR. Um, and like from there, and then also your university will have subscriptions, but you very much need to be in university to get access to these things.
Yes.
Wikipedia is a great resource for it, but if you scroll down and you want to go deeper and you scroll down to the sources that Wikipedia has, majority of them are behind a paywall.
Yeah. Um, which is the sad part. Like, there are a
Yeah,
lot of people who want to learn, but because of, let's not say it's elitist. No, it
it is
writers.
elitist. You can call it elitist. It's
Okay.
academia, it's elitist.
Okay. Okay. Like, sometimes there are writers that I know, like people who write textbooks, who want their textbooks to be available free. However, other people, bureaucracy, publishers.
It costs you extra to publish open source.
Yeah, that's, and
I
not everyone.
know
Mhm.
I know of two organizations called Isagoria and Sasa, and they're working to make the classics open source.
Pray, I pray that that happens soon.
Yeah,
And also other resources. Like, this is why, I guess also why Erudita had started doing the summer school since last year. Um, it's because resources are usually behind a paywall. Usually, you have to be enrolled somewhere to be
yeah.
able to access anything. So it is. We are very thankful that you were very interested and you are very much into teaching. And turns out this is this is practically your dream job, teaching
Yeah,
and researching. So it's a great thing to have you on the team teaching us.
thank
So
you.
I am looking forward to actually finally being able to join the discussion on your next class. It's been a bit busy on my end. Uh,
I feel you.
but but yes, so guys, chat, do we have other questions? Do we have any other like interesting things? Like, let's not talk about the lessons. Let's reserve that for the lesson date. Do you guys have any other like interests or questions or stuff for Bree or anyone? Anyone? Okay, I'm like counting down in my brain. All right. Well, Bree, I look forward to. Okay, where? Oh, Arrakis has a, and this I forgot to ask you this. This is a good question. What myth inspired you the most? Do you have one?
Inspired me. I
Mhm.
quite like the myth of Jason because he's just some guy. He's not part god or anything. He's just some guy that leads this expedition.
Expedition.
Yeah, I think he's pretty cool.
So the classic underdog. I didn't come from a really good background. I'm just here to
Yeah,
do.
like he is a king's son, but like he's not a god. He's not part god like most of the heroes are.
Hmm. Not
I
like
think
Hercules.
Atalanta is pretty cool for that as well. Yeah, I wouldn't
Jason.
call any of them very inspiring because they're all quite sad.
Well, a lot of the classics for that I remember are quite sad too. Like, why people love sadness, you know?
Hmm.
Like, that's one of the most human things. Oh, Kitty has a question. What mythology would you have studied if it was not Greek, or if there wasn't any Greek?
Um, Egyptian.
Back to Egypt, yes.
Yeah, yeah, Egyptian or Inca. I quite like the Inca. The Incan one's pretty cool as well.
it's just access to Incan
Yeah. No, this
is
is very much me specializing in classics instead of um like Peruvian
mm,
is very much down to resources.
it's true. Like my own mythology, my resource has practically been people that have been making fiction out of mythology. So like
Yeah.
that's painful. All right, wait. We we have a few more. What do you know this person?
I
1240.
know there's is one of
What
my mods.
flavor? What flavor would you use to describe the Dutch language?
The Dutch language, I would
Mm.
say it's like a classic donut with nothing inside, just like a glazed donut.
Ooh, okay. Okay, there's your answer. I never even expected that question. Like interesting. Why? Okay, wait. My best friend is Dutch. Why a glazed donut? Why a glazed
I
donut?
I don't know. It's kind of warm and a bit bouncy. And it's not very. It's quite a nice language to learn. It's not overly complex like German or Irish. It's quite a simple language, and I really like that for it. At least coming from someone who's fluent in English mostly.
The Dutch R just threw me off. Like
Look, I can't do the Dutch R. I can't do the Spanish R. It took me 13 years to do the English one.
the English one.
The English like or, like red. I went to speech classes.
Uh, oh, I see.
I
What are
just
your
can't do
thoughts?
it.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I teach my. That's one of the things I'm teaching my student right now. I currently have one voice student, voice lessons. Anyway, I have a question, and this is triggered by somebody in chat. What is what do you what's your thought on Indian mythology, like South Asia, the Indian subcontinent?
I don't really know much about it. I haven't really had access to it, but I know some of the stories, and I just think they're really cool. Like I know I've mostly seen art, and I love the art style. I love the bright colors and the embroidery, and I think it's really, 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 really cool. I like a lot of the stories that come along with it. I can't remember any specifically, but they
Mhm.
just seem really good. I want to. When I have time, I will know more.
Okay.
Um, but yeah,
I would have asked you what your thoughts are also on the Philippine mythology because obviously, but
yeah, I
yeah,
really don't know enough. But like, if I get my thesis done quick enough, I will have like a month off, and that, my God, will that month be spent knee deep in different kinds of mythology?
I will if I can find any good sources for you. I'm gonna immediately send you something about
Thank you.
Philippine mythology. I did dress up as one of the old gods, one of the youngest daughters of Bathala. I dressed up as what would be translated as the star or Tala. So yeah, that was my costume like 2 years ago. Anyway, but yeah, so I think I think we're good to go, you guys. Do we have
Wait,
any other questions? Oh
I'm
yeah,
scrolling through.
yeah.
My
Oh yeah.
favorite Percy Jackson character that is not
Oh yes.
Annabeth. It's Hazel or Jason.
Really? Why those two? I want to know.
Um, I'm a horse girl. I love, and Hazel is too. So horse girl solidarity. And also we went to school with no diagnoses but with learning disabilities, so I really relate to her, and I just love Hazel as a character. Um, and Jason, because by like the boy was raised to be in charge, and I was always put in leadership positions growing up, and he's just so tired and he's out of place, and all the rules are wrong, and I relate to that so much. Yeah,
Horse
people
girl.
don't like Jason, but I think Jason's autistic, like me. So and same with Annabeth. These are just my own personal ideas, and I just think that makes his character make so much more sense.
Well, like they ask, it's just they're asking like what you think. So, perfect answer. But
And I
yes,
think
boys girls unite. How
Horse Girls Unite.
I fell off a horse. It was the
Yeah,
first
no, I'm allergic.
time. Why is it that when we love something, it always hurts us?
Yeah. Kiki. Why am I allergic to you, Kiki?
You're
Um, yeah.
oh Lord.
Okay. I also see Sunny's question. Sunny, I would love to work with you. You are very cool.
Why would Brie be upset if you start teaching it as well? Like
Absolutely
co-teach.
not.
Come on.
I love you too, Sunny.
Cute. All right. Well, guys, Bree's next lesson would be on the
Monday.
yay. It's a good start of the week. Well,
Hmm.
although it's early evening, it's still a good start of the week. Let's start
Yeah.
off our Monday with Greek mythology, and we are going for which topic again?
The creation myth. I've got to continue preparing the class tomorrow.
You have time, don't worry.
Yeah. Tomorrow, though, I will be streaming, getting ready for the class,
Hell yeah. All right.
featuring my grumpy face when I have to read all translations.
Oh Lord.
Yeah, I keep
Well,
getting asked, what is everyone, are you okay? What's wrong? And I'm like, nothing's wrong. This is my focus face. I have resting bitch face when focusing.
oh, it's a problem when you have RBF. Like people
Yeah.
would always think like, "Are you pissed at me? Are you okay? Are you sick? I'm just being nice. I'm asking you." And then when you answer them, and it's like,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. No,
Well,
I'm just
thank
really confused. I
confused.
keep Kiki up here again. You know here? I'll bribe her with treats to come say hi.
Come on, Kiki. Hi, Kiki. Come here. Yay! Look at this beautiful black and white kitty.
She got out on
All
the
right. Well,
balcony today. We brought her out for enrichment time.
nice. Now, Kiki, do you want to say something in the chat?
You have something to say?
She's gonna try. I wonder what she's going to be typing again.
Uh,
Oh,
it's her favorite.
number 7 and number 8.
Yeah.
Let's see if it sends.
There you go. Keelan's message of the day 8.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Bree.
You're
And
welcome.
guys, again on Monday we have Greek mythology with Bree.
The
So
creation myth.
the creation myths. Oh Lord, I I remember the creation myths from Egypt. That was a wild ride.
Yeah.
Oh Lord. Okay. Oh, let's well, we will see you all on Monday. See you guys. Join us on Discord. Wait, exclamation mark Discord. Yes, join the Discord, Erudita. All right. Well, guys, thank you, and see you all very
Mon-
soon.